sometimes the scariest stories don't start with screams. They start with quiet, with someone out in the woods before dawn chasing something small, something harmless. That's how this one begins. He wasn't a thrill seeker or a ghost hunter. He was just a man trying to fill his mornings with silence after life had already taken too much from him. Birdwatching had become his way of keeping the noise inside his head at bay. But nature doesn't always stay kind when you wander too deep. In places where the ground remembers what was buried there, things have a way of calling you back, sometimes through voices, sometimes through something smaller, a sound, a movement, or the song of a bird that shouldn't exist here. Tonight's story isn't about legends or monsters told around a campfire. It's about what happens when curiosity takes you one step too far and the forest finally decides to look back. This is the thrush and the cages. I'd been after that damn thrush for a week. The first time I saw it, it skimmed low across the canal, too fast for a proper look. Its chest was peppered black wings, narrow and twitchy, like it didn't belong here. And that was what hooked me. It wasn't supposed to be here. I've lived in this town most of my life. You get used to what belongs. The same faces, the same birds, the same smell of wet grass every morning. But that thrush, it was out of place. Of course. Maybe it had caught the wrong gust and ended up far from home. For a week straight, I went back to the woods at dawn. Boots on before sunrise, thermos of tea scope slung across my shoulder. It became a ritual, quiet, solitary, and predictable. After my wife passed, I found that predictability helped. Birds never asked questions. There's an old notice board near the canal shelter, half rotten and sun-faded. I'd pass it every morning without thinking. But lately, I couldn't stop looking. It wasn't about lost dogs anymore. It was faces. Smiling faces. People gone missing. That morning, Gareth was there. Old friend, now a local officer uniform, half-buttoned coffee stain on his sleeve, staple gun in hand. He looked up when he heard me crunch through the gravel. Back again, he said, half grinning. You trying to catch that bird or marry it? I laughed because that was easier than asking what I wanted to. He stapled another sheet to the board. A woman mid-20s, smiling like she still believed life would go her way. Below her, a boy, maybe 8, same blue background, same faded printer ink. Both this week, Gareth said, pressing the corners flat. It's been building slow. One here, one there. Women and kids, mostly. Always different families, different parts of town. I asked if there was a link. He shook his head. We're not supposed to talk about it yet, but it feels like someone's picking them out. Someone who knows what they're looking for. I remember feeling a chill that didn't belong to the morning air. He gave me that half smile again. If you see anything strange out there, you let me know. Then he walked off, leaving the board full of eyes staring after him. One of them, the little boy, looked familiar. I'd seen him before near the bus stop by the canal. That was only last week. The woods past the canal run deeper than most realize. From the main path, it looks tame-trimmed grass, picnic benches, wooden signs with butterflies and mushrooms. But step 10 feet off the track, and it swallows you. The trees fold in light thins, and the ground turns soft underfoot. That day, the air was heavy. Not quiet exactly, more like something was holding its breath. No bird song, not even the sound of wind through the leaves. I followed the trail where I'd last seen the thrush, cutting through brambles and nettles. After half an hour, I found something small, half buried in the mud. A child's shoe, red, untied, still clean. I told myself it was nothing. There's always rubbish in the woods. But the sight of it stayed in my mind as I kept walking. It was just past noon when I heard it a sound like metal on metal. Not loud, but clear. Clink, clink. I froze. There was no one out here. No fences, no tools, no reason for that sound. Then I heard it again, this time to my left. Clink, and again behind me. When I finally spotted it, I almost laughed. The thrush. Perched on a stump head, cocked eyes, black and bright. It opened its beak and made that same metal clink. Perfectly. It looked straight at me before darting off into the trees. I followed. The thrush led me deeper than I'd ever gone before. The trees thickened until I had to duck and push through. The ground grew soft and uneven moss, pulling at my boots. Then I saw it a dull glint through the leaves, a flash of metal under sunlight. I thought maybe someone dumped an old car out there. But as I got closer, I realized it was a roof. A rusted sheet of corrugated metal buried into the slope of the hill, camouflaged with tarps and netting. The thing looked like it hadn't seen daylight in years. The thrush landed on top of it, tilting its head at me, waiting. Then it flew off. I didn't follow the bird this time. I went for the door. It was heavy steel padlocked rust, thick around the hinge. And that smell, faint but sharp, like bleach and old rot. I circled the structure, brushing aside bracken, until I found a warped panel with a small gap, just wide enough to crawl through. Inside, the air was thick and wet. I switched on my torch and felt my stomach turn. The walls were lined with 6 cages welded into the ground. Thick bars, each one stained dark. There were blankets flattened and stained. Little things, bits of paper, a broken comb, a child's muslin cloth. Things that made it worse because they were ordinary. And in the last cage, there was movement. He was curled in the corner, thin arms around his knees, eyes too big for his face. A strip of fabric was tied around his mouth. He blinked at me slow, like someone who hadn't seen light in a long time. When he realized I wasn't who he expected, he started moving fast, panicked. Muffled sounds, shaking his head, pointing at the lock, then at the floor. He wanted out. "I'm going to get you out all right," I said. He nodded, desperate. I tugged at the cage, but it didn't move. The bolts were drilled straight into concrete. I searched for tools, a key, anything. There was a table in the corner, one leg propped up with bricks. On it, scalpels, tweezers, a boning knife, and a jar of cloudy liquid. The metal glistened in the beam of my torch. Brown stains crusted along the edges. Beside the table sat a chest freezer held shut with a rubber strap and wired to a car battery. It buzzed faintly. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were tubs stacked tight, each one labeled in marker Shannon scalp. Benjamin lower left arm, Shannon teeth. I slammed it shut and leaned on the lid until the buzzing in my ears quieted. Then I grabbed my phone, dropped a pin, and sent it to Gareth. "Found something in the woods. Bad. Bring back up." When I turned back, I saw 2 mannequins in the corner. One adult-sized, one child. Pinned above them were diagrams, sketches of human bodies, Polaroids measurements, and a list titled "To Replace." Then I heard the lock click. At first I thought the boy had managed to free himself. But the light from outside shifted. Someone was standing in the doorway. He was big, broad-shouldered, one arm hanging longer than the other. When he stepped in, I saw the burns. His face was melted. Skin twisted and healed wrong. He moved with a limp, slow but heavy. "You don't want to do this," I said, voice shaking. He didn't answer. He looked past me at the cages. Then he spoke, voice rasping through scarred throat. "They're mine. My Shannon. My Benji." He lunged. I swung the metal pipe I'd grabbed, catching him across the side. He grunted, but didn't stop. He slammed me into the bars, the air bursting out of my chest. Every breath he took sounded like fire. Every move came with a wheeze, wet and broken. He grabbed my jacket and pulled me close. I could smell burnt skin and bleach. "I'm fixing them," he hissed, putting them back, piece by piece. I twisted free, swung again, clipped his shoulder. He roared and came at me, harder teeth bared. I fell back, hitting the floor, ribs screaming. He pressed a boot to my leg, trying to crush me. I could feel the bones start to give when a voice shouted behind him, "Get down. Drop it, Gareth." The man didn't move. The crack of the baton echoed, and he reeled backward. Another strike shoulder spine until he dropped, twitching breath, rattling like a punctured tire. I lay there shaking while Gareth cuffed him. The boy sobbed softly behind me. Backup arrived fast. They freed the boy first, wrapped him in a blanket, carried him out. I remember the look he gave me as they passed relief and confusion tangled together. Paramedics checked my ribs. I was lucky. Bruised, cracked maybe, but breathing. The man, the monster, was still alive. They hauled him out, screaming names that weren't real anymore. Shannon, Benji, over and over, like a prayer that wouldn't end. At the hospital, I gave my statement twice, then again the next morning. Each time felt harder to say out loud. The details sounded wrong, once spoken, like things no sane person should have seen. When Gareth visited a few days later, he brought coffee and 2 cheap cigars. We sat out back, same as we used to when we were kids. "Ugly bastard," he said eventually. I nodded. He stared at the ground. Didn't know he was still around. Used to live near the old paper mill. His wife and kid died in a house fire. They didn't make it out. He did. He took a slow sip. Guess he's been trying to put them back together ever since. Neither of us spoke for a long time. I haven't been back to the woods since. Not properly. But I still think about that thrush. The police cleared the shed out within days. They found more than I want to remember. The boy, the one we saved, was the last of them. He's somewhere safe now, I hope. Sometimes I replay that moment in my head. The way the man looked at me before they took him away. There wasn't rage in his eyes, just grief. Raw, endless grief. When Gareth left that night, he asked me, "Did you ever find that bird you were chasing?" I didn't answer. A week later, I went back for my scope, left behind near the canal. The woods were quiet again. No sirens, no footprints, just stillness. And then faint but clear clink. Metal on metal, twice. I looked up, and there it was. The thrush perched on the rusted gate. It stared at me for a long moment before opening its beak. Clink, clink. Then it flew back into the trees, and I swear I could hear it calling someone's name. Some stories end when the sirens fade, when the police arrive, when the monster is caught. But not this one, because not everything in those woods was ever found. The shed is gone, the ground sealed, yet people still say they hear it. A sharp metallic clink echoing through the trees at dusk. Maybe it's the wind, maybe it's memory, or maybe it's something waiting, something trying to put itself back together piece by piece. The man who told this story doesn't go near the forest anymore. He says every night he dreams of that thrush, its chest speckled black, its call sharp as metal. And when he wakes, he swears he can still hear it outside the window. Thank you for listening. If you ever find yourself walking through the woods and you hear that sound, don't follow it. Some things don't want to be found again.